The quarterly family meeting was held at Uncle Gerald's estate in Medina, same as always. The mahogany conference table that had belonged to great-grandfather Williams sat in the center of his library, surrounded by 12 leather chairs for the 12 voting members of the Williams Family Investment Fund. I arrived precisely at 2 p.m., carrying my usual manila folder of documents that everyone else assumed contained my part-time job receipts and budgeting worksheets. The other 11 members were already seated, their own folders thick with financial statements, investment reports, and business proposals. The room carried the quiet, serious atmosphere that always came with these meetings, the scent of polished wood and old books lingering in the air while the afternoon light filtered through the tall windows behind Uncle Gerald's desk. "Sophia," Cousin Marcus called out as I pulled out my chair and settled into my seat. "Perfect timing! We were just reviewing the quarterly returns." The Williams Family Investment Fund had originally been created by our great-grandfather in 1987 as a way to protect and steadily grow the family's wealth for future generations. Every member of the family contributed a percentage of their yearly income, and investment decisions were made through a simple majority vote system that had remained unchanged for decades. At the moment, the fund's total value hovered somewhere around $47 million, a number that everyone in the room treated with a mixture of pride and responsibility. What none of my cousins realized was that while they were contributing portions of their salaries and bonuses each year, my contributions came from investment returns that I had never bothered to explain to them. My annual deposit into the family fund was always the same amount, $150,000. To them, it looked like the maximum I could manage from a modest income. In reality, my yearly earnings were closer to $23 million, but that was information I had carefully kept to myself for years. "Before we begin the formal review," Uncle Gerald said as he leaned back in his chair and assumed his usual role as administrator of the fund, "I'd like to bring up a few concerns that have been raised recently regarding the governance structure of the investment group." I felt a small wave of anticipation because I already had a sense of where this discussion was headed. Cousin Jennifer leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on the polished table as she spoke. "Several of us have been talking privately over the past few weeks, and we believe it might be time to have some honest conversations about participation standards." "Participation standards?" I asked calmly, even though I had already guessed the direction the conversation would take. Marcus slid a printed spreadsheet out of his folder and turned it so everyone could see. "We've been reviewing contribution ratios compared to voting power, and there are some trends that we think deserve attention." The Williams Family Fund had always operated under a simple one-person, one-vote structure, regardless of how much money each person contributed. Our great-grandfather had designed the system intentionally that way because he believed equal voices would prevent wealthier relatives from controlling every decision. No matter how much someone contributed, each of the 12 members held the exact same voting authority when it came to choosing investments. "The challenge," Cousin Rachel said in a carefully diplomatic tone, "is that contribution levels between members have started to differ quite a bit, yet everyone still has identical influence over how the money gets allocated." Cousin David nodded in agreement. "For example, Marcus contributed $340,000 this year from the profits of his law firm. Jennifer invested $280,000 from her medical practice income. Rachel put in $190,000 through her consulting business earnings. And then there's Sophia," Jennifer added, her voice polite but pointed, "who contributed $150,000 from her part-time bookkeeping work." In reality, my contribution had come from a single quarterly dividend payout from one of my pharmaceutical investments, but correcting that assumption didn't seem necessary at the moment. "Now, Sophia," Uncle Gerald said gently as he folded his hands together on the table, "we genuinely value your participation in the fund, but we also have to consider how it appears when voting power is equal despite such large differences in contribution amounts. What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. Marcus cleared his throat and glanced briefly at the others before answering. We're suggesting a revised voting structure where influence corresponds more closely with contribution levels. Essentially, the more someone contributes financially, the greater their voice should be when it comes to investment decisions. That sounds reasonable, I replied evenly. Around the table, several shoulders visibly relaxed, as if they had been preparing for an argument that never arrived. However, Rachel continued after a brief pause, there's another issue we believe should be discussed as well. It concerns your investment judgment. My investment judgment? Jennifer opened her folder again and slid a page across the table. We've gone through your voting record from the last 3 years, and you've consistently voted against several of the fund's most profitable opportunities. That statement wasn't incorrect. I had voted against their tech stock selections, their real estate projects, and even their cryptocurrency ventures. My reasoning had never been that the investments were poor choices. In fact, many of them were solid opportunities. The real reason was that my personal portfolio already held substantial positions in those exact sectors, and I had no need to increase my exposure through the family fund as well. For example, David said while pointing at the document in front of him, you voted against the Amazon position that ended up returning 34% last year. And you opposed the Tesla investment that's gained 67% since we entered that position, Marcus added. Not to mention the Seattle real estate fund that's been producing roughly 23% annual returns, Rachel continued. Uncle Gerald nodded slowly, his expression serious as he listened to the list of examples. Sophia, we love you, but your track record suggests you don't understand modern investment strategies. Maybe traditional investing isn't your strength, Jennifer said gently. There's no shame in that. Not everyone has a head for financial markets. The thing was, I did understand modern investment strategies. I'd been implementing them successfully for 8 years, building a portfolio that had grown from my Stanford MBA graduation gift of $500,000 to my current net worth of approximately $180 million. I'd voted against their Amazon position because I already owned $12 million in Amazon stock through my personal accounts. I'd opposed Tesla because my portfolio included $8 million in Tesla shares, plus positions in 3 other EV companies. The Seattle real estate fund overlapped with my existing $23 million commercial real estate portfolio. But explaining this would require revealing the scope of my personal investments, which I'd been deliberately keeping private. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. Marcus exchanged glances with the others. We're proposing a new governance structure. Voting rights proportional to contributions, plus a competency requirement for investment committee participation. What kind of competency requirement? Minimum portfolio size, David said. If you're going to vote on investment decisions for a $47 million fund, you should have demonstrated success managing your own assets. How much are we talking about? $2 million minimum, Jennifer said. That's less than 5% of the total fund value. It's a reasonable threshold for serious investors. Uncle Gerald leaned forward sympathetically. Sophia, we know this seems harsh, but we're talking about family wealth preservation. We can't let sentiment override fiduciary responsibility. I understand, I said. The good news, Rachel said brightly, is that you can still benefit from fund returns as a beneficiary. You just wouldn't have voting rights until you meet the portfolio requirements. So I would contribute $150,000 annually, but have no say in how it's invested? Think of it as professional money management, Marcus said. You get exposure to institutional quality investments without the responsibility of making complex financial decisions. The room was quiet while I considered this proposal. My 11 cousins and Uncle Gerald waiting to see how I'd react to being voted out of investment decisions due to financial incompetence. Can we put this to a vote? I asked. Are you sure? Jennifer asked. We don't want you to feel pressured. I'm sure. Uncle Gerald called for a formal vote on the restructured government's proposal. All in favor of implementing contribution-based voting rights and portfolio competency requirements. 11 hands went up. Marcus, Jennifer, Rachel, David, Uncle Gerald, and the 6 other cousins whose names I won't bore you with. Everyone except me. All opposed? I raised my hand alone. Motion carries 11 to 1. Uncle Gerald announced the new governance structure will take effect at the next quarterly meeting. Congratulations, everyone, I said sincerely. I think this will work out well for all of us. The meeting continued with discussion of new investment opportunities, a biotech startup that Marcus wanted to back, a commercial real estate deal that Jennifer had identified, a cryptocurrency fund that David was enthusiastic about. I listened politely while they debated allocation percentages and risk assessments. Occasionally, someone would ask for my thoughts, then remember that my opinion was no longer relevant under the new governance structure. After the meeting, several cousins approached me privately to express concern about the vote. Sophia, I hope you don't take this personally, Jennifer said. It's just business. I understand completely, I replied. You're still family, Marcus added. This doesn't change anything between us. Of course not, Rachel hugged me by. Maybe this will motivate you to focus more on building your own portfolio. Financial independence is so empowering. I drove home to my modest apartment in Fremont, the same one-bedroom place I'd been renting since graduate school. Once inside, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop to review the Williams Family Investment Fund documentation. The fund had been established with very specific governance provisions written by great-grandfather Williams, who'd been paranoid about family disputes over money. According to the original trust documents, any significant governance changes required unanimous consent from all beneficiaries. What my cousins didn't realize was that their vote to restructure the fund had violated the trust agreement. The new governance structure was legally invalid, but more importantly, they'd overlooked a key provision in great-grandfather's original documents. While the fund operated on democratic voting principles for investment decisions, ultimate control rested with the primary beneficiary, defined as the family member who contributed the largest percentage of fund assets over the fund's lifetime. I opened my secure financial software and pulled up my contribution history. $150,000 annually for the past 8 years, totaling $1.2 million in direct contributions to the family fund. But there was another category of contributions that my cousins weren't aware of. Great-grandfather had included a provision allowing anonymous contributions through third-party investment vehicles. The idea was that family members could contribute additional assets without revealing their wealth to relatives who might become envious or demanding. Over the past 8 years, I'd been making anonymous contributions to the Williams Family Fund through a shell company called Cascade Family Holdings. These contributions totaled $31.7 million, approximately 67% of the fund's current asset base. Under great-grandfather's trust provisions, this made me the controlling beneficiary with authority to dissolve the fund, remove trustees, or override investment decisions. My cousins had just voted to exclude me from fund governance while being completely unaware that I controlled the fund. I opened my encrypted email and sent a message to my attorney. Please review Williams Family Trust governance provisions. Need to understand dissolution procedures. The response came back within 2 hours. Reviewed documents. As controlling beneficiary, you have unilateral authority to dissolve fund and distribute assets. Requires 30-day notice to all beneficiaries. Shall I prepare dissolution papers? I spent the evening thinking about this decision. The rational part of my brain knew that dissolving the fund would hurt innocent family members who'd been counting on those investment returns for their retirement planning. Uncle Gerald had contributed faithfully for 30 years. Several of my cousins had significant portions of their net worth tied up in fund assets. But the emotional part of my brain was tired of being called financially irresponsible by people whose investment success was subsidized by my anonymous contributions. The next morning, I called my attorney. Please prepare the dissolution papers, I said. I want to terminate the Williams Family Investment Fund. Understood. The trust provisions require distribution of assets proportional to lifetime contributions. Given your anonymous contribution history, you'll receive approximately 68% of fund assets. How much are we talking about? Based on current valuations, your distribution would be approximately $32 million. The remaining $15 million would be distributed among the other 11 beneficiaries, and their individual distributions, Uncle Gerald would receive about $3.2 million based on his contribution history. The cousins would receive between $800,000 and $1.4 million each, depending on their years of participation. So instead of managing a $47 million fund with professional investment advisory services, my cousins would each be left with individual accounts ranging from $800,000 to $1.4 million. Still significant money, but without the institutional advantages and diversification benefits of the larger fund. What about timing? Dissolution can be effective 30 days after notice is provided. Asset liquidation and distribution would take an additional 60 to 90 days. Please proceed with the paperwork. I'll need written authorization for a decision of this magnitude. You'll have it this afternoon. After I hung up, I drafted the authorization letter and sent it through our secure system. By tomorrow, Uncle Gerald would receive formal notice that the Williams Family Investment Fund was being dissolved by order of the controlling beneficiary. But first, I had a phone call to make. I dialed Marcus's direct line at his law firm. "Sophia," he answered cheerfully. "I was just thinking about you. How are you feeling about yesterday's meeting?" "I'm feeling good about it," I said. "It clarified some things for me." "Good. I was worried you might be upset about the vote." "Not at all. It got me thinking about my own portfolio development." "That's the spirit. Have you given any thought to what you want to focus on?" "Actually, I wanted to ask you about something. You mentioned yesterday that fund members should have at least $2 million in personal assets to qualify for voting rights." "That's right. It's a reasonable threshold for serious investors." "I was curious, do anonymous trust contributions count toward that threshold?" "Anonymous contributions? What do you mean?" "Well, what if someone had been contributing to the family fund through shell companies or investment vehicles? Would those contributions count toward the portfolio requirement?" Marcus laughed. "Sophia, that's a very sophisticated question, but anonymous contributions would still count if they could be verified. Why do you ask?" "Just wondering about the mechanics. The trust documents mention provisions for third-party contributions." "You've been reading the trust documents. That's impressive. Most family members never bother with the legal details." "Great-grandfather was thorough. I wanted to understand how everything worked." "Well, to answer your question, yes, any contributions that could be documented would count toward portfolio requirements. But we're talking about theoretical scenarios. Anonymous contributions would be nearly impossible to verify unless the anonymous contributor chose to reveal themselves, I suppose. But why would they? The whole point of anonymity is privacy." "Good point," I said. "One more question. What happens if it turns out that someone has been contributing much more than the others realized?" "What do you mean, much more?" "I mean, what if someone's total contributions were larger than everyone else's combined?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Sophia, what exactly are you getting at?" "I'm getting at the fact that I've been contributing to the Williams Family Fund through Cascade Family Holdings for the past 8 years. Cascade Family Holdings? I've never heard of that. It's one of my investment vehicles. Total contributions, $31.7 million. "Sophia, that's not possible." "Why isn't it possible?" "Because you work part-time doing bookkeeping. You can't afford to contribute $31 million to anything." "I can afford whatever I want, Marcus. I have a net worth of approximately $180 million. The line went quiet. "That's not funny, Sophia." "I'm not trying to be funny. I'm trying to explain that your vote yesterday was based on incomplete information." "Sophia, you drive a 15-year-old Honda. You live in a studio apartment." "I live modestly because I choose to. It keeps me grounded and helps me make better investment decisions." You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, $180 million to be precise, built through strategic investments over 8 years since I graduated from Stanford. But you let everyone think. I let you think what you wanted to think. You assumed that because I live simply, I must be financially unsuccessful. Sophia, if this is true, why didn't you ever say anything? Why would I? You all seem so proud of your investment expertise. I didn't want to diminish your sense of accomplishment. But we just voted you out of the fund. I know, which is why I'm dissolving it. What? As the controlling beneficiary, I'm exercising my right to dissolve the Williams Family Investment Fund. The papers are being filed this afternoon. Sophia, you can't do that. Surely I can. Great-grandfather's trust documents are very clear about governance hierarchy. What does that mean for everyone else? It means you'll each receive a distribution based on your lifetime contributions. Uncle Gerald will get about $3.2 million. You and the other cousins will get between $800,000 and $1.4 million each. And you? I'll receive approximately $32 million since I contributed 68% of the fund's assets. Sophia, please don't do this. We can fix the governance structure. We can give you voting rights back. Based on what? My financial competency that you questioned yesterday? We were wrong. We didn't have complete information. You had the information you cared about. You knew I lived modestly and worked part-time. You assumed that meant I was financially irresponsible. We made a mistake. You made a judgment about my character based on your assumptions about my bank account. Sophia, please, the fund has been in our family for 37 years. Don't destroy that legacy because of one bad vote. I'm not destroying anything, Marcus. I'm distributing everyone's contributions back to them. You'll all be free to make your own investment decisions without worrying about my financially irresponsible vote. But we'll lose all the advantages of scale, the institutional access, the diversification, the professional management. You'll have your individual portfolios to manage. Isn't that what successful investors prefer? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. How long do we have? 30 days notice, then 60 to 90 days for asset liquidation and distribution. Is there anything we can do to change your mind? You could apologize. I'm apologizing. I'm so sorry. We all are. Are you sorry for voting me out or sorry for discovering I had more money than you thought? Both. I mean, we're sorry for making assumptions. But if I actually had been financially unsuccessful, you'd still think the vote was justified? Marcus didn't answer. That's what I thought, I said. The dissolution papers will be filed this afternoon. Uncle Gerald will receive official notice tomorrow. Sophia, wait! I hung up. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with calls from other family members. Jennifer, Rachel, David, Uncle Gerald, and various cousins whose names I'd forgotten. All of them had heard from Marcus, all of them wanting to understand what was happening. I let them all go to voicemail. By Thursday morning, the business press would be reporting that a $47 million family investment fund was being dissolved by its controlling beneficiary. By Friday, my cousins would be scrambling to find new investment advisors for their individual distributions, and I would continue living in my modest apartment, driving my old Honda and working part-time helping small business owners organize their finances. Because despite what my family believed, some things were more important than managing large sums of money effectively. Though I had to admit watching their accounts freeze was going to be satisfying, just like I told my attorney they would.